Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for prize fighters, circus freaks, and gangsters. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Greta.
And as always, we are two former teachers who are here to teach you about the pop science, progress, perfidy, pomp, and physical culture of the 19th century. We love the 19th century.
It's perfectly interesting and, well, almost never disappointing.
Oh, I feel like it's endlessly disappointing, but it gives us a great deal of hope. It's hopefully disappointing.
There you go. And this week, why are we here, Jamie?
This is one I picked. I took us back to the noughties. I took us back to the days when Will Smith was still a beloved public figure rather than the pariah he is today. We are going to Wild Wild West. Oh, yes.
And, I mean, this is, once again, they're trying to bring steampunk to the big screen. Will Smith is coming off like his big star turn in Men in Black when he was just the hottest, fastest talking movie star that was out there just about.
He wasn't, I don't think that anybody would ever call him interesting. He was just the guy who was in every movie for a little while. Did you ever think that he was particularly compelling in any way?
I would say compelling in that fast talking way, and he just typically, or in a lot of situations, he could just like kind of keep bringing your attention back to him. And I really feel like he and Tommy Lee Jones had like mastered that sort of like older established white guy, fast talking younger black guy that Hollywood loves that formula. Like that has been the way to go in just so many movies. I mean, Eddie Murphy did it with how many different guys?
Oh, yeah.
How many different movies?
Gary Busey and everybody who ever looked like Gary Busey. Nick Nolte and Gary Busey. Just the two most cocaine-loving psychopaths who have ever... I can't imagine how many horrible things they must have said when they were off camera, those two psychopaths.
But anyway, so they decided to go back to that well once again and go with Will Smith and Kevin Kline for the fast-talking steampunk version of this adventure. And
well, I will say, because I went crazy on the research, and there are two very specific reasons why they cast these two characters, and I don't feel like it was really leaning on that. While I do understand why you say that, I don't think that was the reasoning.
Okay.
So, first off, this is Blazing Saddles 2. So they needed... Kevin Kline is doing his damnedest to be Gene Wilder throughout this entire fucking movie. And you don't feel like this was him just... What would Gene Wilder do in this situation? And then he did exactly that. And so they were kind of playing that, like the Cleavon Little and Gene Wilder kind of thing. And then also, and I think this is the more important thing, is that in the film, this is a film about two fictitious
sort of lawmen,
Secret
US
Service
Marshals,
agents. Yeah, they're Secret Service agents who work for U.S. Grant, and they're like his super spies. And so this movie's based on a TV show that was conceived to be a James Bond set in the Old West. Mm-hmm. So, but U.S. Grant is actually a really interesting character, and he was appointed to the General of the Army by Andrew Johnson, who was a total piece of shit, but the one good thing he did was U.S. Grant. So, U.S. Grant became the next president and promptly overthrew everything Johnson did. He appointed to every cabinet level position he could. He appointed a competent black or Jewish person they had all been boxed out of that. And Kevin Kline is half Jewish. And Will Smith is obviously black. So I believe that the casting, because they did their research for this movie, I think that the casting really was that deep.
Okay, that's definitely possible. I just feel like when it came down to, like, how are we going to package this movie, that is sort of how they sold it, though.
Oh, yes. That is like you said, I mean, this is a buddy cop movie, and it is a tried true buddy cop formula to have like you said, the white guy and the black guy teamed up together. Even down to Lethal Weapon had Mel Gibson and yeah,
Glover.
I mean that was.
Yeah.
And then you got Rush Hour. The Rush Hour movies were really popular at the time, so we had Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker. Yes, so I feel you there. This is really a tried and true formula.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the TV show because when this movie came out, were you aware of this TV show?
I had never heard of it in my life. I didn't know that this is where the world learned of steampunk.
Right, neither did I. And I was like, how come there was because there were actually 2 movies made in this like Wild Wild West universe in the late 70s and in 1980. Like, they did nothing to sort of like remind people, hey, your dad, when he was a teenager, really thought this show was great. Because apparently it was a popular show.
Yeah, it was really popular. It was on for 4 years or 5 years.
Yeah. And so I sort of feel like they were introducing us to this world and these characters, and maybe we were supposed to know something about them. But obviously I kind of knew that there was the TV show, but there had been nothing about it.
No, they really... I didn't know that until I started researching today. Because, I mean, we went through 25 years of knowing about this movie, having seen this movie, never knew that there was a TV show. It's never been on TV. I looked, I can't find... It's not on any of the streaming services I have.
It's not like on even like Tubi or something where they play everything?
I'm sure you can buy it somewhere, but I was looking and I saw one of the movies, more Wild Wild West, but I didn't see the other one. So, but I wanted to watch one because it's supposed to be like, and this movie really is James Bond in the Old West, so it's perfect. Like, the whole thing, I think it's a great concept.
The concept, I think, is great. And yeah, I was looking back at it, and it was sort of somebody's sort of brainchild looking like, okay, well, James Bond and like the whole spy thingy is totally knocking the Westerns out at the movie theater and, off TV. So what if, stay with me here, combined spies and cowboys? And apparently on TV, they made it work.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, this is perfect for us because this movie is set in 1869, which is right in the time period we have been talking about nonstop. So, I mean...
Oh, yeah, and it's this great chaotic time in terms of, like, when do you want crazy stuff to happen? Like, right after the Civil War, everything's kind of in an uproar, all sorts of crazy shit is happening, and the world is rapidly changing, so... I'm in. I buy it. Let's go.
And this movie really does encapsulate what you just said because the world is fracturing at the same time that it's uniting because this movie is centered around the Transcontinental Railroad being the final spike being driven, which united the 2 coasts of America and basically united the United States at that point.
Yeah.
Which was...
I was going to say, yeah, we went from sort of like... this more regional country, and then there's this idea like, no, we're all going to be hooked together. And so there was a bunch of territory between California and Oregon, and then sort of what was the Northwest at the time, kind of everything up to the Mississippi River. But there was still a lot of territories. These weren't states yet. But this was sort of the last thing that said, nope, we're taking the whole thing over. Nobody's going to pretend that nothing else is going to become another separate country. And then the Civil War sort of like was the last straw into that. It's like, nope, this is going to all be one country. Dang it.
Yes, and now we have the telegraph and the railroad connecting the 2 coasts, and we're all one nation, damn it. Everybody get along. Everybody love everybody.
Yeah. So, and for me, because this is the first time I'd watched the movie, the clue that like, oh, there's something else going on here is that opening credit scene. Like that felt like a late 60s, early 70s, like movie/TV credit scene. The way they were playing with the colors and the framing. And it was very much like, okay, all we have is film that we can like recut. We don't have digital effects really yet. But we want to make it look cool and up to date. And that's really where they were going with the credits of this movie.
Yeah, it was very similar to that movie, The Avengers, that came out around the same time, which was also a TV show adaptation from a show none of us had ever fucking seen. So we had no idea what the hell we were watching.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess I was aware of the TV show Partly because
the Avengers.
Partly because the actress that played Emma Peel was still really well known. Also, I feel like cool British style had sort of come back in when that movie, The Avengers, based on the TV show, had come out. And they did a little bit to actually like push the old TV show too.
Oh, did they? So it was more than this one.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, this movie was perfectly positioned. Mm-hmm. It is the thing that spawned steampunk, which was getting really popular in the late 90s.
Yes.
It starred Will Smith, who was really popular. Mm-hmm. Kevin Kline, who I know him from movies, but I can't say that I've ever liked him in a thing.
I mean, he also was very popular. And so I was sort of like trying to bring two crowds of movie watchers, like people who he was well known in sort of the drama side of things or like more serious comedies. Like he was in Midsummer Night's Dream when that whole rash of like filmed Shakespeare movies hit the theaters. He was in that movie Dave. Like he cracked me up.
Oh yeah, he was in that was the really cringy movie. There was a whole series of very cringy movies in the 90s where old white guys like met a younger black guy and then learned to like hip hop, and like wasn't he the president or some shit? Oh no, this was the one where he was pretending to be the president.
No, that one.
Yeah, he was in a lot of cringy movies.
Dave was actually kind of sweet.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah,
I'm mixing it up with the one where there were so many movies at that time where, like you were saying, where an older white man learns from a younger black guy to love life again. Gets his joie de vivre.
We solve racism in this movie. That's what was sort of a lot of what was going on in the 90s.
Yeah, we fixed it.
Do that. Yeah,
put a stamp on it. We got this one licked.
But Kevin Kline and Kenneth Branagh being in the same movie, like that happened several times. Because again, there were all those film adaptations of Shakespeare movies, and these were some actors that were in a lot of those as well. Oh,
he always speaks with a very like posh British accent, but it's almost like making a mockery of the British accent. I feel like when I'm thinking of Kenneth Branagh.
Well, he's when he's in those Shakespearean movies a lot, he's doing that accent, but also just he is naturally British and sounds that way.
Oh, yeah. Is he naturally British? Oh, well, you know what? Nobody's perfect.
Naturally British. Well done, me.
Well, actually, I take that back because then we come to Salma Hayek, who is perfection. She is perfection in human form. Has there ever been a lovelier? She is beautiful.
She is. Good and God. Then once again, she's filling that role in sort of all of these 80s, 90s, early 2000s movies where the woman has some skills and is like cool under pressure, but is like painfully underwritten.
Oh God. And all she did was make confused and she's a scientist, spy badass. And half the time she's just like, oh, I'm swooning for Will Smith and what is happening to me? Oh, and it's like, what the fuck is going on, lady? Like, pick a lane.
And it's trying to be like, she's manipulating these men by being sexy. And it's just like...
I mean, to be fair, men would follow Salma Hayek off a cliff. Yeah. I mean, we would let her drink our blood if she was a vampire. We'd be like,
True.
Yep, this is the way I need to go. We'd be lining up.
But the way her role is written, like every single movie kind of like this for like 30 years, that role was in there. And it just was the way it was. Yeah.
And then we had Ted Levine as General Bloodbath McGrath. And this guy carried the movie on his back, I felt like. He was a beast in this movie. He's so gross.
Oh, just like he was the 19th century all in one sort of gross, disgusting, shiny, greasy package.
he was like he waited his entire life to play Igor in Young Frankenstein, except make it as gross as possible. Because there was a ton of Mel Brooks in this too, you know what I mean? So it was like, this really felt like a Mel Brooks movie.
I think they really were trying very hard to Mel Brooks it up. There were definitely moments where you're like, that was kind of like Blazing Saddles, or that was kind of like Top Secret, or that was kind of like Airplane. Like they'd have these little moments, but it was so disjointed, like it didn't fit with the other things that were going on in the movie.
Well, that's a perfect segue to the opening. The opening is an homage to two different movies. Army of Darkness, starring Bruce Campbell, which had come out about 5 years before this, and Master of the Flying Guillotine, which was a kung fu movie that was constantly on Saturday afternoon. So we had all seen it a million times because it's this guy running through a cornfield with this weird thing on his neck. And then there's this like saw blade flying through he's running through like a wheat field. And this saw blade comes and cuts his head off.
Schwink.
Yes, but you get the scared person running and the extreme close-up of their face all weird, like with Bruce Campbell in the Evil Dead movies and Army of Darkness.
Right.
And then the Master of the Flying Guillotine obviously was the weapon that yes, it was.
And it's like fully you don't know what's going on. It's dark and threatening in the south, and then you get like weird science-y, steampunky stuff going on. So you're like, okay, lots going on here. I'm in. Let's go.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a weird tarantula on the saw blade that cuts a guy's head off. And so Ted Levine's the first person we see in this movie, and he's so gross. So he's had part of his face melted, and I guess his ears come off. And so they had these things called ear trumpets back in the day. Are you familiar with ear trumpets?
Yeah. It's sort of like cupping your ears, but like literally a big trumpet horn that you would boink, stick in your ear.
Except this guy's had it it looks like horse flesh or something was used to sew this trumpet ear into graft it onto his face, and his face is all melty too. So and he's so sweaty all the time. It's so good. It's so good.
And so you're that happens, and the next thing you know, you're kind of in this weird wooden bathtub with Will Smith and a naked lady, and it's kind of James Bondian.
It's super James Bondian. It's super duper. Yeah. James Bond and Austin Powers all rolled into one. You weren't sure if he was going to fart in the bathtub and make a joke about bubbles in the tub, like Austin Powers, or if he was going to say something suave, like James Bond.
So boom, we start off with another action. I mean, the whole thing where it's oh, I'm with this pretty lady, but I'm also on a stakeout. I was already wow, this movie's already kind of off kilter for me.
Well, let me just say, so they are inside of a rainwater collector, and I'm just thinking that two people who have lit candles and are banging inside of the water people are going to drink.
Right?
That's how people get cholera. That's how people get all kinds of diseases.
That is how people get cholera. Okay. The good news, I guess, is that wouldn't have been drinking water. The interesting thing about that is that also wasn't a rain barrel. What that was is you'd have those big elevated water tanks next to train tracks, because steampunk era, this is the age of steam.
Oh, gotcha.
And so you're filling the water tank of the train. They would have to have these water stations all along the train route, because you can't have a steam train if the train has no steam.
That makes sense. And condoms at that point are lambskin. They'll burn right up in the...
Shoop.
Yep.
Yeah.
So no problem. No muss, no fuss right there.
But the bad thing, I don't know, but a lot of the ways that water rights are really screwed up in the West has to do with the railroads setting up these water stations and getting the government to grant them water rights, and then sort of dividing them up in these weird ways all across the West. So the railroad building these water stations so trains could get across the U.S. has a lot to do with why water rights in the Western states today are so screwy.
Oh, I thought it was just everybody's climbing over each other to make sure no water makes it to Mexico.
The train started.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I know you're going to be shocked. Wait, railroad robber barons wanted to screw Mexico from the very start? What?
What? Color me shocked. They should, you know what? They should just be glad that white people took the time to notice that they existed.
Should they be grateful, Jamie?
They should be grateful. Oh, Jesus Christ. What the fuck has been going on in America? We are a mess.
Yes, we are. So we're so much of a mess that...
I like the way that current events just hit us both in the face, and we were like, whew, all right. Wait, we got to take a step back. All right, here we go. We're back on this movie.
Let's go to a brothel. How about that?
Let's do it. Oh, let's talk costuming. Oh my God.
And a brothel with a fun name too. Fat Can Candies. How fun was that for a name?
I didn't even catch that. That's amazing.
Right, like that's a Mel Brooks right there.
It really is.
So let's talk costumes in this fabulously named saloon brothel bar music hall.
Yes. So this music hall, I would say if it was, I think this music hall might have been period accurate if it was a very, very rich music hall. You know what I mean? Like, because the accoutrement in this place, even though it's like a hard Scrabble looking place in the film, any place that was decorated in this fashion would have been a very expensive place to be, I would imagine, in the 19th century.
I mean, it definitely felt to me like the kind of saloon that you would find around gold fields or silver fields, because you've got a lot of people with, all of a sudden they're really, really rich, but they're out in the middle of fucking nowhere, so they have nothing to spend it on, so they keep spending all their money on booze and women, and so suddenly the saloon can like start importing chandeliers and glasses and pianos and silk hangings, and that's how it read to me, and that's a thing that really happened.
That makes sense, and then everything's just covered with miners, grease, and dust because it's the Old West. So you get real shabby chic. It's not
right.
It's not slightly distressed furniture. It's you didn't sprinkle dog pee on the floor. That's real pee. That's real pee stain.
But yeah, so costuming for sure. I mean, the fabrics that everybody was wearing were like thick and sturdy, and like they went to the cotton and the wool racks.
Yes.
To dress these guys.
Yes, they did. Now, so we see Salma Hayek is wearing she's basically wearing like a bustier with a bunch of
lace doodads,
beaded fringe. Yeah, beaded fringe kind of. And so there are some women later on who are like the Loveless's like harem, and they're all kind of dressed similarly, which I felt was period accurate, but I needed to get your take on it. Where'd you go? I mean,
since there's just a lot of like sort of plussed up stuff in here, like, okay, this is kind of like how it would be, but now we're going to make it costumey and shiny. It's sort of like if you wanted to put somebody in a very provocative looking costume that read as cool and costumey to us, what they did to Salma Hayek, I think, was great. I mean, it was just sort of what it would be, but just sort of redone for a 1990s person or an early 2000s person. Like, so in Bass Reeves, like what the prostitutes were wearing in the saloon, like they were all sort of like loose and schlubby and everything. Mm-hmm. And that would have been like super accurate, but this is sort of a fantastical movie.
Gotcha. So
you sort of made it shiny. But it wasn't anything like, I forget, we were watching something and I'm like, oh, stop. That just looks stupid. No, this looks nice. This just sort of looked like you just turned the volume up a couple of levels and just made it look more exciting instead of ridiculous.
Totally. And it really fit with the kind of 90s because, I mean, we had that song, Let's Talk About Sex. Like, we were all terrified of getting AIDS. So, like, seeing these dancing ladies with like, stockings on, they were wearing, like, it was almost like a one-piece bathing suit, but then they had stockings on. And that I've seen strong women performing in that time period. So, like, they really, like, even though it seemed a little, like, not old-fashioned, but, like, prim, I guess, to have the leggings on or whatever, you understand, you get the feel that it's still racy because you see these ladies are, like, kind of slutty ladies. You know what I mean? So I really love the way they presented it in here. The way you were saying.
And that's another thing. Like, in that day and age, wearing stockings, so like actually putting more on your body, was considered sexier than not wearing stockings because they were sort of a luxury object.
Oh, okay. I get it. That makes sense. Huh.
Yeah.
All right, fun. This movie is amazing. If it's not a perfect movie, and it's not a perfect film, obviously, any movie with Will Smith in it is not going to be perfect. He can't act. But the movie is such an amazing teaching point. I feel like every scene in this movie, you could be like, I could teach you 3 things about history from this. So it's amazing.
Oh, I mean, this movie had money, and the prop department got a lot of it, and they did really good things with it. The saloon, like I was saying, it had that feel, you know, the multiple levels, the big open space in the middle, like decorated with deer antlers, like all just perfect.
Yes. And then, so are we really going to go through and discuss everything that occurs in this? I don't think does it really matter?
I don't think we really need to, except you can also tell this is a 90s movie because the homophobia and transphobia are on full display, and it will pop up occasionally and just smack you in the face.
Okay, so here's one thing we need to get into, and it was something that I tried to research and couldn't get an answer to because I can't watch the show anywhere. However, there was a running theme in this film about cross-dressing that I could not understand. It was so pervasive. Mm-hmm. Like, Kevin Kline's character could not stop dressing up like a woman and asking Will Smith to dress up like a woman. It was like fucking the most aggressive Tootsie anybody ever saw.
Right.
And so he's dressed like a woman in this, but she can't pass, and Will Smith's making all these comments about it. But then the General Bloodbath, McGrath, he takes a liking to Kline because that's always the way the bad guy does. He likes the guy who's dressed up like a woman.
The beefy woman, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. My favorite part of this entire thing, which we have to discuss for 1 second because it was so Nickelodeon, was when he throws Kevin Kline up on stage and tells him to sing a ditty, and then he takes his little ear horn and turns it down, and all this like goop slimes out of it, and he gives this totally disgusting, sexually satisfying sigh. And he just goes, as the goo pours out, and then he turns it back up, and it was so amazing. That was the most 90s thing, and I loved it. Yes, Nickelodeon.
I mean, that was like hands down the most like viscerally disgusting moment of the entire thing. But yeah, I don't understand like what it was about. Like, if you look at the movies of this period, men dressing up as women badly or people being outed as quote unquote cross-dressers is a thing that like shows up in a whole bunch of movies. And on one hand, there's like I feel like this is like when the fear got reignited by men. Like, what if I get fooled by a cross-dressing man? Like, how embarrassing for me. Like, this was just sort of like this weird thing in the air. And I don't know, like, this was really when men were starting to realize, I feel like, whoa, what if I get treated by other men the way I treat women? That would suck.
I will say that did happen to me once. And it was before I was really... It was a watershed moment in my life where I was walking through a club and I saw this woman and I told her she looked gorgeous, and then we started making out, and then the girl I was there with was like, oh wow, you guys really like each other, like and both of you are named Jamie. And I was like, that's cool. And she was like, yeah, do you guys ever see each other at the gym? And I was like, no. And she was like, well, I'm pretty sure you both of you dudes go to the same gym. And I was like, say what now?
Yeah.
And then I was in the bathroom on the phone with my brother. Does this mean I'm gay? But everybody has that moment. So well, I don't know that everybody has that moment, but cocaine is a hell of a drug.
Cocaine is a hell of a drug, and there was also plenty of that at this period of time, as we may have discussed. But yeah, so we find out that this Gordon guy is a master of disguise and, an interesting dude. And then we get to see James West going to Washington. I'm going to go to D.C.
A master of disguise with a particular affection for dressing up like a lady.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he's constantly like proving that he is in touch with his sensitive side, and yet just criminally incapable of connecting with a woman in any way, shape, or form, which is really fun in this film. But
we get Will Smith, Agent West, walking up to the White House. We see the Capitol building under construction, which is, again, this is amazing to me. Like, while the Civil War was going on, they are constructing Washington, D.C. as we know it today. That is the craziest thing to me.
Like 10 miles from the border to a country you're at war with, too. Like, it was really wild. Yes. That was really fun to see it in the background, though.
Yes. And so they have West walking up to the White House, and there's sheep in the front yard. Period. Accurate. they did have livestock on the White House lawn at different times in history.
They mowed the lawn until we had our first mechanical lawnmower in, like, I think it was 1904 or something like that. It was very early that they had one.
Yeah, and that was early. Like, mowing your lawn is a thing that Americans have only been doing for like 100 years, max.
Ooh!
That is such a new tradition.
We skipped something that we need to run back to.
What?
So, there are hypnosis boobies.
Ooh, no, it's his belt buckle.
Oh, his belt buckle. So, Gordon, Kevin Kline's character,
yes,
hypnotizes the bad guy with his belt buckle, and this is important because hypnotism was it was pretty brand new at this time, and it was invented by a surgeon named James Braid. Do you know anything about hypnotism?
I don't know anything about Braid. I do know a big proponent of it was this dude called Mesmer. So it was also generally known as mesmerization.
There's two things. So mesmerism came from mesmer, and that has to do with the person who is mesmerizing. It's based on their individual skill. Then hypnosis is based on the person who is being hypnotized as opposed to the person who's doing the hypnosis. And so Braid was a very, very early adopter of ether as an anesthetic. And he was exploring all these different ways to anesthetize people. So he performed 300 successful operations under hypnosis. He used hypnosis as anesthetic. And I've actually seen it. I've actually seen documentaries about it. It works. So I don't know how, because I feel like all that shit's hokum. But this was really important to 18th and 19th century medicine. So I thought it was important that we just circle back to it.
I mean, I think we think of it more now as something like biofeedback or something, but they really were tapping into, like, you have this ability to distract your brain from itself kind of thing. There are definitely people who are more able to be subjected to it. There's definitely a willingness possibility, like people who like put themselves into like trances or like in a meditative state. That is a form of self-hypnosis a little bit.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I'm not saying like it's exactly the same, but it's sort of like you alter, it's all this consciousness altering, and because people were doing it chemically, why couldn't you do it like physically as well?
Yeah, and they were all really big into Eastern esotericism and stuff like that. So the idea that like these yogis could do all this stuff and control their minds, they were really, really trying to get on that type time. So, yeah. Oh, and we had our first Germans, too. And I've been yelling about how there's no Germans in the Old West in any of these movies, and we finally had Germans. So I had to bring that up.
Germans all over the place. Germans costuming, German accents. Oh, yeah.
There was a woman reading lips with binoculars. Did you catch her name?
Ms. Lippenrieder.
It was amazing. So that was awesome.
So, yeah. This is another thing where I feel like, okay, we're kind of getting somewhere. And then there's the whole gag that Kevin Kline is also Ulysses S. Grant, but he's not only just Ulysses S. Grant, he's his stand-in as well. Like, that whole thing was so weird.
Yeah, so he was playing two characters. He was playing the president.
Yep.
And then he was playing the Secret Service agent who was pretending to be the president.
Right.
And so they're doing this gag in the White House, and then they switch right into a French Connection homage, because then it goes right into him, berating these two bad cops for doing a shitty job of copping and stop blowing up public property and beating up citizens and do your goddamn jobs. So, but I love that we're tying together all these movies. I love it so much. It's so good that we did French Connection. That was a great call.
Even if I had the actor wrong. But yeah, so we sort of get like, okay, this is what's going on. We've got the evil bad guy who's trying to take over the world. He's kidnapping scientists and making them make inventions. And I'm starting to see this theme. It's like, okay, because this happened in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and you just like in this spy era, there's the evil mastermind who looks at this new technology and immediately wants to use it for like profiteering and crime. And the people in charge are like, what an evil guy, but don't figure out what to do about it. And I just sort of, again, like, look what's going on with AI right now. And it's like, this will save humanity. And then all of a sudden it's used for evil profiteering and crime. And I'm like, wait, this is a theme forever.
Well, I don't think that science has always been for evil profiteering and crime. It's just that stupid people want an easy way to steal from people, and they will always latch on to they're very quick adopters on new technology because anything to make their life of thieving easier.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. Like, every time this new technology comes along, most people are like, oh, this will solve all our problems, and they try to overuse it for that and whatever. But the people who are in charge of making regulations never say, okay, so last time there was a big advance in technology, the bad guys came and they used it to, like, do evil profiteering and crime. Maybe this time when this new groundbreaking technology comes out, maybe we should put some guardrails around it before that happens. And we never learn. This is the one thing the movies has tried to tell us forever. And they've been right, and nobody gets the message.
No. And I mean, even when it doesn't matter. It happens, like you said, it happens over and over and over. It doesn't matter how many times it happens. But this guy, like, not necessarily this character, but like the bad guy Loveless's character seems to be inspired by Robert the Conqueror. Did you ever read Jules Verne back in the day?
I read several of his books. Now, I wasn't a completionist by any means.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm certainly no completionist, but I've read a couple of the Robert. I read Master of the World. And so
okay, I don't know those.
It had an amphibious tank in it, driven by this megalomaniacal bad guy who would just drive around through the countryside and fly into a town and smash it flat and steal all their shit and then leave. And he really liked having evil inventors. He and H.G. Wells really liked the evil inventors who would have this technocracy from which they would launch all these missions to take over the world. So they both of those guys definitely were at the crux of this plot line, I think.
Well, and I feel like there are a lot of, like, stories and movies and everything where you've got, you know, the evil mastermind who has his mountain or cavern or undersea headquarters where he's launching highly technological attacks from. I mean, that was very sort of the James Bondian kind of adventure story that was. And so they're definitely pulling that storyline through, and it's great.
Yeah. And back to real technology. The center point of this is that the president is going to go, U.S. Grant is going to go to he's going to drive the final spike into the Transcontinental Railroad, which happened on May 10th, 1869. So we know the exact date of the important events of this film.
And that whole Golden Spike ceremony, like, that was a big deal. It was kind of taking place out in sort of the middle of nowhere, Utah. But, I mean, having this continuous steel ribbon coast to coast, you think about that. Like, that was the longest piece of, like, mechanical travel that existed in the world at that time.
This happened before the Panama Canal. So this was our first, like, haha, fuck you, universe. We can fucking do anything we want. And so it was like this, and then the Panama Canal, and then we got to the moon. And every time we're just like, fuck you, God, we can do this.
Humans, we're unstoppable.
We're the ultimate virus.
So one other sort of, like, piece of technology or theory or whatever that was in here that I thought was fun was, it's a little gross because they have, like, a dude's head in a rack, basically. But Gordon, Kevin Kline's character, is talking about retinal terminus theory and this idea that your brain kind of works like a camera. And so you could record, like, whatever the last thing you saw before you died. And so people were trying to do what Kevin Kline did in this movie of, like, somehow show the last thing that they saw before they died.
It makes sense, like, that the image would be burned into the back of your retina as you died, and then they would be able to shine a light through it, just like a camera plate, and be able to see it. Like, they were applying the technology of of cameras, which was mimicking the human eye, and then applying what they learned back to the eye. So you can see where they got to it.
Right. I mean, because the lens technology was the same, but the recording technology, oh boy, just no clue how that worked. But that was that sort of like when you're like, oh, how could people believe this? Or how could people believe that? I mean, this is the kind of thing that they were scientifically investigating at this point. And so the idea of spiritualism wasn't that much weirder.
Yeah, they had this guy's severed head in this like contraption holding it with a very bright light going to the back of his head that was shining through his eyes onto the wall. So he said that the images flipped upside down. Is that true?
Oh yeah. Like if you do pinhole camera stuff, anytime you have a small thing where light goes through big, gets scrunched down and comes out big on the other side, it's all going backwards.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So that's the camera obscura or...
Yeah, all of that.
Okay.
And so like old single SLR lens cameras and everything, like anytime you squeeze light through a hole, that's how it does it. Like it goes all in these diagonal lines. And so the top one ends up on the bottom and the bottom ones end up on the top. Like that's how it happens.
Huh. It's that was really fun. And I really liked the motorized penny farthing that they had prior to that. It was totally ridiculous, but it looked amazing. It was a penny farthing is the bicycle with the big wheel in the front and the little wheel in the back, and then it had a steam engine attached to it.
Yes.
And that thing couldn't be ridden, so they actually had to pull that on a track. But I looked it up, and there was a steam velocipede that was invented in 1867. There were 10 of them in the U.S., and they would travel around and demo them, and people have made them now that actually work. They didn't really work back in the day, but like you can see video on TikTok and shit of people driving steam velocipedes, and it would have been fun if they had thrown that in the movie, but maybe there wasn't one that anybody could make run until now. So, I mean, it has been 25 years.
Also think about, they spent a lot of camera time on a lot of ridiculous stuff, and they really did put a lot of the cool props in the movie, so, you know.
But the bikes that company makes, the replica company that made this bike, they cost like $6,000. It wasn't like it would have cost some. They could have gotten some guy with a shed and who likes making steam engines, just some man with some Methuselah beard who hates his wife and lives in a shed in the backyard. He would have made that thing for a song, I'm sure. So,
well, getting all that welding right so it doesn't leak the steam, that.
Oh, actually, there's no way you're getting insurance for that on a movie set, I don't think.
Yeah. No. So we've got our evil, nefarious villain with his technological advances, and then boom, we also find out that James West is going to also be getting back at Bloodbath McGrath for horrible, horrible atrocities against Black people. And so this gets thrown into what's supposed to be a comedy. And I'm like, how many movies are we doing in this movie now?
That was so unnecessary. Like, he's a Confederate. He's still wearing his Confederate fucking uniform 4 years after the war ended. Clearly, he's a bad guy who's done horrible things. We didn't even need to hear that shit. Also, you didn't need to add a different reason for him to need to kill this man. I mean, again, he's still wearing his Confederate uniform.
Yeah.
4 years after the Civil War's over. He probably is a guy who needs some killing.
Yes. On the other hand, we finally get to meet Professor Lovelace. And now, this is a man who is not wearing his clothes from 4 years ago. This is a man who changes his clothes about every 4 hours.
He has some amazing costumes, too. Well, the half of him that's visible.
Yeah, this is another Kenneth Branagh doing another accent. And I will say is kind of this, like, comic supervillain with a Southern accent. He does a great job with that. He
oversells every accent hilariously.
Yes.
He delivers everything like he is a Shakespearean actor. I can see him being. I didn't know that beforehand, but it totally makes sense now because every word is said with such bombast.
Right. Like, he is a great, like, cartoon villain, and that's great. And so we're in this costume party, and you have all of these different potentates and princes and kings and emperors and from all over the world here meeting at, like, hey, we're going to redivide up the country. And at this point, that was still an idea that people were like, oh, well, this is possible. Like at this point, Europe is still going out there and carving up the world. And like every, German state and Austrian state, and like France is still not the same shape it is today. And like you have all of these little principalities all over Europe who want a piece of the action.
Yeah. And on top of that, you have two distinct, you have 3 or 4 distinct nations inside of the United States. Appalachia is its own nation basically unto itself, and at this time you got the Northeast, you got the Southeast, you got Texas, and then there's a bunch of other shit mixed into. The West is over there. I mean, so it would be easy to partition the country because there is no country. It is just these localities that are all under the same general banner.
Right. I mean, the whole idea of being a united country is still very fuzzy. And then like the really elaborate embroidery and, different decorations they have all over these like extremely impractical military uniforms was on point. Like this is how people with power in the military and just in Europe were dressing. So just all of these fantastically embroidered uniforms, that was what the world looked like in the 1860s.
Everybody looking like a general, I guess.
And the crazy thing is like this is the first time all of these people could easily get together. You had steamships, you had trains, you could move people around the world in just like a matter of weeks rather than it taking like months or years to travel from, say, Central Europe to New Orleans.
And not just travel in weeks, but travel in weeks in relative comfort. I mean,
right.
And for rich people in very sumptuous comfort in many cases. So.
Oh yeah, you're in the middle of the ocean rocking and rolling, but you've got crystal and silver and china and truffles and partridge and yeah, like it's insane the amount of comfort and speed that is suddenly like thrown onto people. And if you were rich, you took advantage of it.
Kevin Kline's Pullman car in this, what is that guy? Artemis Gordon's, his Pullman car, like that they use as their rolling base of operations,
right,
is a great example of that because that Pullman car looked accurate from what I've seen of Pullman cars. I mean,
oh yeah, the upholstery, the chairs, the phonograph, the little kitchen that he has going there, the brass, the glass, the polished wood, the crystal, all of it.
They even had bathrooms in those things. And I didn't know this, but the bathroom that you get if you have like a small bathroom in your house, that's a very small bathroom with a very small shower and just it's a shower, a toilet, and a sink. That's called a Pullman style bath. It's 7 feet by 3 feet, and and that is specifically designed after the bathrooms they used to put in Pullman cars, which is crazy. This is 1869. Like Germany is barely even a country at this time. Italy, I don't even think was unified at this time.
No.
And people in the United States had like running water they didn't have hot and cold running water, but we didn't have hot showers in the United States until the 1960s. That shit blows my mind. But yeah, they had cold showers they could take, which is crazy. Like people weren't even taking showers at this time, but you could on a train.
Well, you'd have to be rich to have a bathtub. Like some of these Pullman cars would have like a big old bathtub in them.
No shit.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
So like a lot of the comfort technology that they were showing in this was like really on point, and we don't see it now because again, like we just have so many mod cons, modern conveniences. But back then, like that was all of the plush stuff. Like that's how you knew somebody were rich. They had oriental carpets on the floor in the bathroom that had running water.
God help us with the carpets in the bathroom. Oh my God. You watch those home shows and you see shag carpet in all around the toilet, and it's like, oh, just get out of there. Burn that house down. That's got pee from the 1970s in that carpet.
So the house that we moved into, it was a new home, and more or less the moment I found out I was pregnant, I'm like, we're tiling the kids' bathroom right now.
Yeah. Oh my God.
We ripped up that carpet, learned how to use a tile saw, and yep, that was my first tiling project. Tiling a bathroom floor, not that tough. Choose big tile. That's the secret.
It's a lot less tough than getting child's pee out of shag carpet, I'm sure.
Yeah. That's what bath mats are for. You pick those suckers up and throw them in the washer.
Oh, my word. Oh, and we have Bai Ling in this scene coming in looking like My Ling. How about that? Like,
Right.
She really looked like she was wearing one of My Ling's dresses from Warrior.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, they definitely went and got all of that fabric out of the upholstery department because it's all brocadey and embroidered and everything. And then they barely used any of it to make these tiny little outfits for her.
Yeah, well, she is a beautiful lady. So, there you go. And she's a tiny lady.
Yes. And once again, we're doing the whole James Bond shtick where you've got dudes doing stuff and then they have all of their like beautiful lady minions around them, like aiming guns and adjusting gear ratios and taking down messages.
Yeah, that was a real James Bond gimmick. They loved that. Oh, and Kenneth Branagh is in a steam-powered wheelchair, which I thought was very fun. And I, of course, had to look it up. So in 1811, there was a chair invented called Merlin's Mechanical Chair. The dude who invented the first steam-powered wheelchair was named Merlin.
Okay.
And it was invented as an amusement chair. So it basically looked like a your average chair, you know, with the top that kind of goes around your head a little bit. I don't know, so you can sleep with your head leaning on kind of a headrest. And it just had like little wheels on the bottom. So it looked like a chair you'd have in your living room. And it would just move slowly from place to place. But after the War of 1812, people who were injured in the war started using them to get around.
Oh.
And so, yeah, it was a little known first steam-powered wheelchair. How the fuck they knew that in 1999, I don't know. Because they didn't the internet barely existed.
Yeah, and it certainly didn't have information like that in it.
No, it was just the most disturbing porn on Earth.
Yeah, the very first wheelchairs were actually just chairs, like you said, with wheels on them. Then they had these wicker ones called bath chairs. And so it would be for elderly people to just sort of move them around. Obviously, rich elderly people, poor elderly people, they're on their own. But
we haven't really progressed.
No. But another thing that they would do is they would wheel these chairs like out into a lake or something. And so you could lay on this wicker chair and it would be like cool for you out there.
As you take the air.
Yes, exactly. And quite often they would have like hoods over them and everything. So you'd be like out in public, or not public, let's not be ridiculous. But then you'd have like a tent over you so you could be modest and private and whatnot. It was very weird.
Yeah. You wouldn't want to stave off rickets by letting your eyes get a little sunlight to hit them. God forbid. Got to keep that pallor, that ghostly pallor going.
Oh my goodness, totally. Well, that's how you knew somebody was rich, that they didn't have to be out in the sun and getting not pale.
Yep.
Yeah, no, a tan was not something you wanted until about the 1960s.
Not entirely true.
Really?
Yeah, so the whole Muscle Beach thing comes from Germany. They had North Sea beach communities where they did the hand balancing, all the shit you associate with the 1940s and 50s in California.
Okay.
Happened in the late 19th century through World War II in Germany. And so I assume that's where we got the idea. So people were getting tans back in the day. And especially in Germany, it was sunbathing was like a health activity. So it was a very important health activity. But the British were pasty weirdos, and we got that pasty weirdo shit from them. No spices on our food, and let's look as shitty and pasty as we can.
Okay, and I can also see it like in a place where, you would be laboring but all covered up, being tanned and muscly from, because like once you start sending people into the factories, like no, I'm like outside doing fresh air, healthful activities. Okay, I can see that. Yeah,
that was a lot for the strongmen of that day. That was kind of the gimmick, was that you couldn't even tell that they were jacked until they took off their suit, and then you were like, where the fuck did all these muscles come from? Holy shit, he just looks like a normal guy with a big neck. So yeah.
So we get this total party, and then Will Smith messes up, and we have a lynching gag in here. I was like, what? That's not funny.
So there was a problematic but amusing exchange right off the bat with Will Smith and with Jim West and Loveless, where Will Smith is making, so Loveless starts off by making all these black jokes, and very unrepeatable.
Right.
I mean, the N-words is never said. It's implied through the whole thing. And then he's making fun of Loveless's handicap because he has no legs, and or anything. So he can't have sex. He can't do anything. And so Will Smith's mocking him for that, and he's mocking him for being black. And this goes on for the rest of the movie, and it's just it was a lot.
And like, this is another thing. I felt like every time they made one of these quote unquote jokes, there was like pause for laughter. I'm like, it's not funny. Like, that must have added a half an hour, all of the pause for laughters. In this movie.
They were nearly looking at the camera for like, all right, did you guys think that was funny? Because it was funny. You're supposed to laugh. You're supposed to laugh at that.
So there was that in there. And then we find out that, Loveless is the one who committed a lot of these atrocities, supposedly attributed to the Confederate side. And so this was this other weird thing that was going on in the 90s. It was like a revival of the 1990s, this revival of like the Confederate apologists. And it's like, see, the Confederates weren't so bad. It was really just a few bad apples within the Confederacy.
Yeah, much of the early internet was devoted to trying to, quote unquote, prove that the Holocaust was a hoax. And I mean a lot of the early internet.
Yeah.
And and then a lot of that's where you get all this stupid shit in Florida about, oh, well, they learned to trade from slavery, so it wasn't all bad. Just what the fuck. But it all came from the John Birch Society. It started in the 1960s, I think, after the civil rights shit. And they were the ones who spread all the gun nut bullshit and then the South will rise again shit. So by the time the 1990s came around, they were really gaining steam and blew up with the internet. And so they were pushing that shit hard.
Yeah, I mean, it really got started in sort of the 1890s and sort of went forward from there. Like, a lot of these streets that are named like Lee and Johnson and all of that, and Jackson, like, that was an effort to remind Black folks, particularly in the South, that like, hey, we're still here, we're still on top, and you have to look at the names of your oppressors. They're Nathan Bedford Forrest, just all of these assholes. Like, look at statues of them everywhere.
There's statues of Nathan Bedford Forrest?
Oh, yeah. And some of them are terrifyingly bad.
Well, you would think the man was like a swamp maniac. Am I thinking of the right guy? Oh, no, Jeb Stuart is the guy I'm thinking of. Jeb Stuart.
No.
I'm sure they're Jeb
Forrest
Stuart.
was like one of the bigwigs in the Confederacy. There were phone books with his boyhood home. Like, oh boy, how do I explain? So you used to get a book with everybody's phone number inside it delivered to your house. And
And it weighed 50 pounds. It was humongous. It was as big as you're imagining. It was bigger than any Bible you've ever seen.
And people would and it would be like every year or so, and there'd be a contest there would be some significance about like what went on the cover of it. And Bedford Forrest's boyhood home was on the cover of one of the ones that I found in my grandfather's office. Like, this whole Southern pride, they called it. Like, I was raised being told, no, you should call it the War of Northern Aggression. And, like, that was just in the air and around. It was like, we weren't so bad. They made us fight. We just wanted to, be left alone, to abuse people who look different from us.
Yeah, and I mean, even because they really pushed states' rights, and they didn't they didn't say it's so that we can fucking oppress whoever we want to. It was just like, you're not a bad person. You do the right thing. You give to charity. You'll do the right thing, and everybody else will too. So states' rights. And I was like, yeah, that fucking works. Not knowing.
And what I love, of course, is when there were a bunch of things. It's like, okay, sure, states' rights. How about we make this legal here and protect the rights of people based on sex? And they're like, no, we can't have that. You can't be protecting people with states' rights. We need a federal law that says boys are boys and girls are girls, and that's the end of that chapter.
Well, these are the same people who go to a foreign country with guns in their luggage and then insist that U.S. law applies to them instead of the law of the place that they've gone to. So, not much that they do makes sense.
Yeah, I love when it applies for guns, but you're like, but you do know, like, whether or not it's right or wrong, all money that you earn as a U.S. citizen is taxed in the U.S. no matter where you earn it, supposedly. And they're like, the gun law should apply to me internationally, but not the tax law. In fact, the tax law shouldn't even apply to me in the U.S.
And the gun laws that were put into place by a Republican president in the 80s sure would have come into handy this week, I feel like. They might have prevented certain events. But, It's...
Can I just say, that whole, like, large portions of my brain have just turned into static about that. Like, I can't even deal.
Yeah, well, we stopped watching the news. I took the news shit off my phone, and we've started taking different routes to go to the certain places we go. We go to very specific places, and that's where we're going. That's it. Till we leave the United States, we've got our places we go, and that's it.
Woo! And, and then sort of, is it just me, or I was just sort of like, the rest of this movie happens. Like, you kind of know what it's going to be. They wander through the desert and, again, strangely homophobic, find the bad guy's place, and then we have the longest fucking chase and fight scene to end this movie.
Well, number one, so he's built this gorgeous Irving Brunel-inspired Crystal Palace lair in the desert, which you'd bake to death in if you were in this thing.
Oh, I totally thought that. I'm like, they don't even have air conditioning yet, so everybody's a shriveled little grape.
They would have been dead within seconds. But it was beautiful. And he's like, and so I'm like taking copious notes because, now everything's been so meticulously researched. There's history in all of it. And I'm like, oh, awesome. Ooh, we're going to get to see this cool city. And then it's blotted out of the screen by this giant mechanical spider that he's now driving. And I'm like, so he's got the hottest women in the 19th century in their panties hanging out with him, doing whatever the fuck he wants to do. And what he wants to do is make a mechanical spider, leave his bachelor fuck lair with these gorgeous women and go attack the world with a giant spider. What the fuck is happening? That is the dumbest idea. I've never heard of anything so stupid. I mean, my God, what is his name? The guy who came up with the theory of everything, Stephen Hawking. Every spare minute of his free time was spent in strip clubs.
Yeah.
And he was the smartest man who has ever lived, basically. So I just feel like this guy would have sat his happy ass, his non-ass. He would have sat his torso at home and baked with these gorgeous women in his hot house of
giant
death.
Crystal Palace that we only got to see for 10 seconds?
Yeah.
Like, I do feel sorry for whoever rendered that image, and they're like, I spent how many days did somebody spend putting together that city in a canyon, and it was on screen for a good 10 seconds.
Just their masterpiece. It's like
there was a roller coaster in there.
I have completed my masterpiece. Flip. Well, what have I done with my life? Ah, boy. Oh, and he even gives one of his harem girls the greatest 19th century name of all time, Munitia. I didn't catch what any of the other women's names were, but the one doing the shooting, her name was...
Except for Miss Lippenreader, of course.
Oh, yes, Miss Lippenreader and Munitia. But those names were amazing. But then this movie just goes to shit because now there's a giant mechanical spider.
And they, like, spend all of this time on that, and then Will Smith has to get, the longest, most boring fight scene ever?
Oh, after climbing to the top of this thing only to say something that wasn't even worth saying and getting shot in the chest, so he falls off the thing and having to do it all over again. And did you notice the robot tarantula had a giant dick too? Because they were making all of these jokes about how he was compensating for his lack of dick. And
I think they made that joke like 3 times in this movie, and you're like, yeah, okay. So we got women with no lines and tiny little clothes. We've got, clearly this like unnecessary action scene, and we've got, hey, look, a penis. I'm like, yep, it's a movie from the 90s.
A giant. We had a huge like drilling fucking machine that
they never even used, as far as it was just a dick joke.
Yeah, he was just likening it. He was just saying, if I need to get these women off, I can make a machine that can get them off. I got it. I got the skills. Even though he didn't, because that was fucking Selma Hayek's dad making all this shit, apparently.
Except at the end, it wasn't her dad. It was her husband all along. So women be manipulating you with their sexiness just to get you to do what they want.
Yeah, because if they knew
she was never going home with either of them.
Yeah. Is that a thing? If guys know that a woman is like dating somebody, will they not help her if she's in a situation where she needs help?
Do I look like a dude? I don't know.
I'm just asking if that's happened. I guess it must happen. Jesus fucking Christ.
Well, maybe the guys writing this wouldn't. I mean, because it is true that when women are trying to get a dude to leave them alone, and they won't just take the normal, like, leave me alone, no thank you, goodbye, I'm married / I'm dating someone seems to work. So maybe the flip side, I don't know. Like, just treat them like entire ass human beings, and it gets a little bit easier.
Well,
it is the 19th century in this movie, so
yeah, exactly. But you know what? I did like that Loveless's alliance. The Loveless Alliance, and he had a good theme song. First off, his national anthem, and then I enjoyed that he made this cabal. So they've now alluded that he's a terrible person, but they're also kind of like, but he's formed this coalition of the rightfully aggrieved. In one way or another, they're all people who are rightfully aggrieved with the United States, and they are all trying to get their payback. Apparently, using this legless man with a giant robot spider.
Hey, but it is true. Like the Spanish Kingdom, they wanted Florida back, and New Spain, Mexico wanted, their chunk of land back. France and England would like some of theirs back that we just kind of like biffed people out of. I love how it's all the European nations though. Like the fact that there's still plenty of Native American, Indian nations all over the place. It's like, no, you're still screwed. This is the 1990s. We couldn't give a flying fuck about you.
Well, they intimated that the natives had allied themselves with Loveless because his kind of like bodyguard guy was a Native American. Yeah. So I was, and on the map it was kind of like the Pacific Northwest sort of.
Was going to be Loveless land, yeah. Yeah,
I was thinking they were getting folded in there because I was looking on this map for the Native Americans and they were nowhere to be found.
No, we're still dividing this up among the European nations. Yeah.
Yeah. Never mind, they're in Utah, and there's like the Paiute and the Ute who are literally under a genocide at the moment this is happening. And they're like, well, we can't use this robot spider to save them from the Mormons. Well, clearly. No, that would be unethical. So I guess we'll stop the railroad from happening, which doesn't make any sense either.
Yeah. Like, even if you're an evil genius, like, he seems to want to profiteer from his mechanical inventions. How are you going to get them out to the coast since your factory's in Utah?
Yeah, also, if you just smash one part of the railroad, they're just going to fix that part of the railroad. I mean, none of it made any sense. But neither did having Frankenstein as the final boss. But it wasn't even Frankenstein. It was like, so they took There was a bad guy in Judge Dredd who was like one of the guys who lived in the Cursed Earth, and
Sure.
And Stallone had to fight him. And he had a metal like plate in his head,
skull cap thing.
Yes, yes. And this was that guy just they took his metal arm off and gave him his arm back, and it was Frankenstein from Judge Dredd, which came out at exactly the same time. Yeah, why not? It works. He was shiny and gross too.
And yeah, that was. I don't know what it was about that fight scene, but like Will Smith had to get in like a minimum of 3 jokes with each guy, and they had him fight like 5 different dudes. I was just like, this fight scene is going on for so long. And so I will say that 21st century movies that like have the strung out fight scene where they do like a whole bunch of really cool moves, but they like either repeat them or do them in slow motion. It's sort of like really long fight scenes. Yeah, people love those. We'll just do it slightly differently. I'm like, no, stop it.
Yeah. Yeah, it was the fight scenes. I mean, but I recently watched a boxing match from 1897, and I gotta say, people couldn't fight back then. Yeah. So if they couldn't fight in 1897, they certainly couldn't fucking fight in 1869. So yeah, or 1997. So it was realistic. Everybody started to learn how to like turn into John Wick in 2000. So yeah, everybody started taking MMA and learning how to shoot and shit and like. But yeah, back then, people didn't know how to move as a tactical unit. There was none of that. The military was just a bunch of stumbling idiots. Especially in the 80s, they had comic books. To learn how to clean their guns, they had comic books that they issued because the literacy was so low.
Wow. Okay. I believe it.
Yeah.
But, okay, so as far as an idea, I think this movie had so much potential. I mean, clearly it did. A lot of people threw a lot of money at this idea, but the execution, ow.
If the return on their investment that they were looking for was shade, they got as much shade per dollar as they could possibly get. But that was about it. I mean, and did you notice that the theme from 1,000 Ways to Die was ripped off of this movie directly? It was like they just fucking took it straight from this movie.
Oh no, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, I mean, it is hilariously identical. I didn't Google it on the YouTubes, but I'm sure somebody. It's as bad as there are those videos that go out on TikTok of like new singers, who,
right? Yeah,
are considered to be new, and it's like no, they ripped off every song they ever made from somebody. So.
Well, if anything, this definitely deserved it. But the props department, I hope everybody just like looked at how cool everything looked on screen, because there was definitely that love of like, let's do the American West and sort of like somewhat jankety and then fantasy steampunk construction. I really feel like they did that beautifully, but the story was not there to carry it. Bloodbath McGrath could not do that.
We really have yet to get a steampunk movie that lives up to the potential. Of steampunk. So yeah, it'll happen.
Yeah, but I really feel like they're like, okay, now we're gonna do the great steampunk movie. They put too many stars in the movie who can't work together, and they kind of try to put too many movies in the movie.
Yeah, exactly what you were saying before. Yeah, and it's a problem that I usually see with Korean movies, but it does happen with steampunk movies a lot, where they're like, nope, we need one more deadline, and it's like, the world's going to end 16 different ways, and like, they got to save the world so many different ways at this point, but they're like, nope, we could get one more subplot in there. We need extra motivation for the character.
Because this one sort of felt like they were trying to do a satire. They were trying to do like a prop comedy thing where they had like little vignettes that were funny. They were trying to do a buddy cop movie. They were trying to do We Fixed Racism theme and sort of fantasy alt history. They just crammed so much into this movie, and it could not hold it all.
I really feel like in the noughties, we were just doing the best we could, as loud and as fast as we possibly could. There was, we had the pedal to the floor, and we were trying as fucking hard as we could, and yelling about it the whole way. But
and yelling about it. So when it comes to this movie, should somebody in the 21st century spend their time to watch this film?
I don't think it's not a bad way to spend. I mean, if you watch the first hour, you'll be entertained. You could skip the last half hour. But I think the first hour of it was entertaining. Is it a movie that I would really recommend to anybody? Nah, I don't think so.
No. If somebody was like, what does steampunk look like when it's done well? I would say, yeah, just fast forward through and look at the cool props and the scenery. But as a film, nah. This is not on my rewatch list for sure.
No. I think you could probably watch Sherlock Holmes 100 times to every one time you watch this. And I'm not saying that's exactly the most historical movie ever, but it's certainly much more fun to watch.
Yeah. Well, we survived that, and most of the bad guys did not. So...
Nope. And you know what? I have somehow managed to come away without a desperate urge to dress as a woman for our next episode. But we'll see. We'll see. You never know, because apparently it's catching. So.
Yeah, you gotta be careful. Like, it'll just sneak up out of the floor and get you.
The gays will get you like that.
I mean, look at what's happened to women. They suggested we wear pants, and we've never stopped.
You know, Joan of Arc got burned alive. You know this, but she got burned alive for wearing men's clothes.
Actually, the reason she got burned alive is she wouldn't recant that God had talked to her. That was fine. That was really the big problem.
Okay. I recently saw something that said that she was burned alive for dressing as a man, and I was like, well, that tracks with everything I've ever read about history. So, but no.
No. It was religious nonsense, and it was also political BS. The French and the English had a score to settle, and she's just some chick, so we can sacrifice her and call it done.
And the Pope doesn't talk to women. That's poppycocking nonsense.
Ew, gross. All right, so what are we going to do next time?
Zorro, the big Z.
Yes. So do we start with a movie? Do we start with a ridiculous series? Like, where do we go with this?
I don't know. Do you want to go the telenovela route, or do you want to go Antonio Banderas?
I
feel like, is Salma Hayek in the Antonio Banderas Zorro?
I think she is.
Yes. I think we may need to go that way. I love Desperado. And that movie is just, it's a popcorn film, and it's trash, but it is beloved in our house.
But I love a good popcorn trash film that is just like, you watch it, it's easy, it's light, it's silly, just sit back and enjoy it.
Yeah, and you get all that awesome mariachi music. It's very it's very festive. So where do you want to start?
Let's go ahead and do the Antonio Banderas Zorro. I mean, there have been a million Zorro films. We may end up talking about some of the other ways that Zorro has been depicted on screen. But then I think we should, drop into the telenovela a little bit and see Zorro from the not American side, because he is.
I love this. It's going to be fun. I've always loved, I want to learn history from the Persian perspective, or from, the Ottoman Empire's perspective, rather than the Triple Alliance's perspective, whatever it was. It's nice to get the other side. So I'm really excited about this, because I don't know shit about Zorro.
All right. Well, let's get a nice primer of Zorro and go from there. So Antonio Banderas as Zorro next time. But don't tell anyone, because he's in disguise.
Oh, okay.
It's a secret identity.
I thought Puss in Boots was his secret identity. I only just realized Puss in Boots is Zorro, isn't he?
No, basically. Puss in Boots is his own character.
But I mean, it's Antonio Banderas. He's wearing a mask and he's doing Zorro shit, isn't he?
Well, yes, he is. But Puss in Boots is a character in legendary history in England.
Oh, I did not know that.
You didn't?
I did not. There's a swashbuckling cat in English literature?
I don't know how swashbuckling he was. He was actually, but it is more of the boy leaves home and finds a mentor to help him be a hero in the up and coming big bad world of London.
Ah, yes. It's a time as old as...
Tail.
I guess. Yeah, tails. String. It's as long as string. All right. We have done it.
Okay. So where can we find you on the internet?
Oh, I am on Instagram at Plague of Strength, where I discuss all things sweaty and muscular every day. How about you?
You can find me at my other podcast, The History of American Food, where I will talk about food from our American history, and I am firmly in the 19th century for a very long time because, oh my God, a lot happened then.
Nom, 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 nom. What are we eating this week?
I think I'm talking about fish.
Oh, all right.
And how we went from a nation where you could get like 96 different fish at the fish market to a nation that can only name maybe 10 fish.
Overfishing?
No, we just lost our variety in fish. Like, people just won't eat different fish now.
Oh, I won't eat fish of any variety. I won't even eat a cow that can swim too well. I just I stick to land-based food, land in the air. Yes.
All right.
All right, guys. We'll see you next week.
All right. Bye. You can always reach out to us by email at pcgpodcasters@gmail.com. And you can find more dope beats like this one from royalraven.com.